ma'am.
Thank you, Asha. Well, it's my pleasure and privilege to introduce to the gathering the plenary speaker, Dr. JAH Khatri. He is currently an assistant professor at School of Liberal Studies and Education, Navrachana University, Vadodara. He completed his undergraduate at Gujarat University, Ahmedabad, and MS at University of Baroda, Vadodara. He began his teaching career in 2005, and his experience spans over 17 years in teaching. He cleared the national eligibility test in the year 2007. He has a significant number of articles published on different areas of study in both language and literature. A few of his research papers titled Language, Dialect and Tribal Language, Anthropological Study of Manipuri Proverbs, Female Empowerment or Commodification, a mixed question in portrayal of women in media and literature, Introduction to Communication Skills, and Culture and Representation, the emerging field of media semiotics displays varied interest and inquisitive mind to explore and exploit the world around him. Apart from publications in English language, he has, to his credit, several other publications in Gujarati as well. He has been the convener, keynote speaker, and moderator of several national and international conferences. Dr. Khatri is a member of Center for Education, Innovation and Research, member of Reviewer 3 for Interwoven, an interdisciplinary journal of Navrachana University, a member of International Cell of the University as well. He has also been a member of Board of Studies for the BA JMC program. His areas of interest include communication theory, semiotics, linguistic anthropology, sociolinguistics, and applied linguistics. We are pretty glad to have you amidst us, sir, and I invite you to deliver the plenary talk, sir. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am, for such an elaborate introduction. I would rather prefer to say that I'm a learner of language and communication. So thank you so much for inviting me for this gathering. And before I begin, I must congratulate and appreciate the EFL Department of SRM Institute, Science and Technology, and IFEST India for making this kind of what we call Herculean task possible and organizing such an international conference, which is basically a need of the day. So without wasting much of our time, let me move on to my presentation. Just give me a minute so that I can uh, upload my PPT. I'm unable to see the sharing option. Yeah, just a moment. Yeah, is my PPT visible?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. It's visible, sir.
So I'll just minimize my screen so that it doesn't. So my topic is very simple. I'm talking about three very important concepts that have played a very crucial role in the study of language and communication: metaphor, dialogue, and communication. So basically, when we emphasize more and more on interdisciplinary approaches to understand the human sciences, it allows us to look at the issues of social interaction from a newer perspective, which is also supported by cognitive sciences and cultural studies. Here, I'll make an attempt to look at the ideas of idealized or so-called standardized language and the real communication. How are they related? And what will be their impact on the practitioners? I'll be using a special case of non-literal use of language to emphasize the idea that communication brings the language into existence and practice. I also argue that belief in idealized language will adversely affect the variation and multiplicity of practices. So this is the flow of my presentation. So let's move to the first concept, the language. When we look at this code of communication, that is language, we take it as a rule of grammatical rules. It's a set of grammatical rules supported by a certain community and or authority. One's ability to use the grammatical rules appropriately to express oneself is what is known as the capacity to communicate. Thus, linguistic skill is a mastery of abstract rules, something Saussure identified as la langue and Chomsky defined as linguistic competence. You can see the cartoon here from Tarzan and Jane. Rodman Fromkin uses this cartoon to explain the linguistic competence and linguistic performance. So in the first three panels, what Tarzan is thinking while singing, swinging on the way to meet Jane, is basically his linguistic competence, his capability of use the language. But when he actually reaches in front of Jane and what he actually spoke is his performance. Now, the question is whether it is possible to have knowledge without its actual use. To put it more directly, will there be any linguistic knowledge without employing it in real communication? Here, I argue a lot of meaning emerges from the actual process of communication rather than being fixed in the system of language. To some extent, the process of communication precedes the identified grammatical rules and fixed linguistic meaning. So there's a school of linguistics called integrational linguistics, initiated by British linguist Roy Harris, who comes up with the dictum that language presupposes communication. So the language cannot exist without the need to communicate. Moving forward, this is the speech circuit proposed by Ferdinand de Saussure. Uh, this particular model is also referred to as talking heads model by Roy Harris, and it is also referred to as canonical speech situation by the people working in the field of language and media, such as Dura and Lemro. Here, Saussure implies that all the participants involved in the communication process possess the same level of linguistic and encyclopedic knowledge. All the participants involved bear the same level of semantic repertoire. In other words, they interpret the utterances identically. This looks fine from the descriptive position because Saussure was basically trying to describe what actually happens in the speech situation. But if we go on the other side of the fence and we take a prescriptive perspective, then this prescriptive view will take the contrary perception. It is not contended with the idea that in a speech situation, the participants involved will interpret the utterances identically. Rather, a prescriptive perspective looks at the situation and prescribes that all the participants must interpret utterances identically. Thus, a hypothetical assumption of speech circuit is taken as a canon, as a dogma, a rule that everyone must follow and master. The model accounts for the linguistic capacity only from one end. It takes the knowledge to be individualistic and monologic. If we go by this hypothesis and hypothetical model from the prescriptive perspective, then every user will have identical linguistic and encyclopedic knowledge. Okay. So we are basically hypothesizing a utopian society where everybody is equal. Linguistic knowledge is an acquired system, and every user acquires it in his or her limited exposure to the world. We have knowledge of language, not to speak, but we have knowledge of language to communicate. The code, that is, the language, is limited, but the users, the communicative situations, and the communicative goals are limitless. Moving to the second concept, communication, is a process through which we as humans shape ourselves and develop our unique identity as being humans. It distinguishes us from other living beings as no other living entity has such an advanced communicative system. The tool we have to do such an important task is the language. All of us have this tool, but all of us use it differently. This tool can be used as a tool of compromise, or a tool of cooperation, or even a tool of conflict. All communication is defined and limited by the situation in which they occur, which also define the shape and style of the language to be used. The concerns about appropriateness and not the grammatical correctness are very important in the cases of communication. Bakhtin, Mikhail Bakhtin argues in favor of the idea of dialogue or dialogism, which is again another phase of what we call communication. He adds that we learn or acquire a language because we want to communicate. Through dialogue, language comes from a neutral to a socio-political domain. Bakhtin also introduces the concept of heteroglossia, the coexistence of distinct varieties within a single language. This notion goes against the popular notion of the standardized language. The standardized language or the idealized language denies, puts the other non-standardized varieties on hierarchically lower scale. There is a kind of uh, vertical hierarchy created that the standardized languages are superior languages and non-standardized colloquial languages are inferior languages. So dialogue opposes this very idea of hierarchy. Every variety comes with ideological and social baggage. The denial of a variety is also the denial of a different ideology, a prescriptive or a perspective or a worldview. So if you deny any specific variety as not appropriate variety or not a perfect variety to communicate with, then basically we are trying to deny the worldview that is projected by that ideology, by that variety on the speakers and the users of that variety. Both parties involved in communication act will attempt to represent reality from their respective point of view. So every variety comes with a particular reality. And in this process of representing reality, language becomes a facilitator, directly associated with the user's first-hand experience of the real world. Moving to the third concept, metaphor and figurative language. Metaphor is, in fact, one of the most often utilized techniques for expressing the unknown through analogy with the known. According to Newsel, figurative language is replaced by the term metaphor in the new cognitive domain. As a result, it is no longer merely another figure of speech. On the other hand, Halliday says, I quote, metaphor is an inherent property of higher order semiotic system and a powerful meaning making resource, unquote. We will go ahead with this notion of metaphor as one of the most powerful meaning making resource in day-to-day communication. I'll just cite one example to understand this process, that how we consciously or unconsciously use the non-literal language or metaphoric language in our day-to-day communication. Okay. And it is also embedded in our what we call linguistic system. Let's give me an example. Let me give you an example of, let's say, compound words. When we put two words together to create another word. So if we use a word like black, which is an adjective and it is a color term, it refers to a specific color hue. But when we combine this word with another word, let's say a noun money, so the resulting word will be black money. It becomes a noun. And in this noun, black money, there is no sense of color involved in the meaning of this newly formed compound. Here, it refers to income illegally obtained or not declared for tax purposes. So, the meaning that we are getting is not only non compositional, but also non literal. Here, in this discussion of metaphors, I would specifically like to invoke the examples of proper nouns that are used in non literal sense. I've got only three examples to discuss here. The first one is on Mount Everest. The word Everest or the name Mount Everest was named after British surveyor Sir George Everest. Before that, this particular mountain peak was known as Peak 15th, and this particular name was adopted in 1865 by Royal Geographical Society. Now, this new name is now used metaphorically to imply superiority because Everest is the highest mountain peak, something superior. So, in India, we have a brand of spices called Everest Masala. I'm sure all of us are aware about this particular brand. They supply this product all over the world. And the name Everest, which is known to all, creates similar metaphorical extension of meaning that is not just referring to a brand, but it also refers to the quality of the brand, that they are the best in their domain. Interestingly, there's another brand of spices in the state of Gujarat. Its name is Girnar. And the Girnar also refers to the highest mountain peak in the state of Gujarat. Okay. So Everest is for India and for the world, while Girnar is for Gujarat. Thus, these brand names not only create an identity in terms of the quality of the product, but they also define the market. That Everest is something for India and Girnar is something for Gujarat. Okay. So that proper name gives us metaphorical extension of the meaning. And what is interesting is we don't face any problem in understanding that. The second example I'm taking from the movie called Parched. This movie is basically a Hindi movie, but it sets in the rural background of Rajasthan. And the language used in the film is Hindi, but with a heavy accent and vocabulary from the local variety. That is, there's a lot of words from Rajasthani dialects. There is a question about a women's education, which is uh, पढ़ी लिखी ने इंदिरा गांधी बनना से, which is literally translated as, by educating yourself, do you want to become Indira Gandhi? They're using a proper name, Indira Gandhi, in the statement. Here, the use of proper name, that is proper noun Indira Gandhi, former Prime Minister of India, is used to give the implication of achieving a high position. The name does not refer to the person. Rather, it refers to the position the person had achieved. Similarly, the name of a British born Pakistani Bollywood actress from the 1980s is used to refer to the beauty. The name of the actress is Salma Aga. The personal reference of the proper noun is minimized to her beauty. So, here, what's interesting is we are referring to some human beings, but we are not referring to those human beings in their entirety. We are only taking one characteristic of that human being. So we are taking a metonymy from that noun and we are assigning that metonymy on somebody else or something else. So we are using proper names, but not referring to the person. We are just referring to the person's position or we are referring to the person's beauty. And that is assigned to somebody else. Right. Third example, this is from Comfort Fabric Conditioners print media advertisement. This advertisement presents two historical figures in an animated avatar, divided in the middle. We can see there is a border. Above the border, you can see the reddish color. The lower part is blue, that refers to the water. The upper portion is out of water while the lower half is in the water mixed with the said product. So you can see the bubbles in the water, which implies that the water is mixed with the particular conditioner. Without using any word, the advertisement argues for the softening effect of the product by metaphorically presenting two historical figures, Adolf Hitler and Mohandas Gandhi. The extreme right and liberal political stance are compared with the hard and soft qualities of the fabric, respectively. The simple argumentation visually presented that the hard fabric, like Hitler's hardcore extremism or fascism, will turn into soft, like Gandhi's liberal stance, if it is put into the given product. So they are simply saying that our product has the power to convert the hardcore extremist into the liberal in terms of the what we call fabric. So a very hard fabric can be turned into a soft fabric by using this product. Moving forward, such non-literal use of proper nouns is very normal in our everyday language too. Though I'm just citing the examples from popular culture, but they are very regular in our day-to-day language. Referring to someone as Raja Harishchandra because the person is accustomed to speaking the truth, or complimenting a lady by calling her Aishwarya Rai or Marilyn Monroe or some other such heroine's name is very normal in our day-to-day communication and dialogues. As a linguist, these practices interest me because they go beyond the so-called linguistic norms. They are unwritten in grammar books and they are unrecognized in dictionary entries. The best part is that the users, either the producers or the consumers, do not have the slightest problem interpreting these extensions of meaning. This poetic aspect of the language takes birth in the actual dialogic event, as it depends primarily on the encyclopedic knowledge of the users. Appropriate interpretation makes the communication successful. So, in the end, I would like to say, as Roy Harris has rightly put, that the language presupposes communication. That is, we always require the background of communication to develop a code to communicate. and the research in the Creole languages, and the, like, if you go back to, let's say, Derek Pickerton, and uh, they have worked on Creole languages, where uh, they have proved that people have actually created a code because they wanted to communicate it. They did not have any common code, and that's why they created Creole language, which was later turned into a pidgin language. But our normal scenario is always in favor of the so-called standardized or idealized language. Now, this bias or precedence of language, a supposed idealized code our communication, and real life practice, they are different. And our normal practice is supporting the idealized language. But this stand implies the favor for idealization rather than practice. And this is also extended to other domains other than language and communication. For example, almost everywhere, the saviors of culture try to save an idealized utopian idea of culture, which is not just hyperreal, but also monocultural. They try to wipe out all the variations of practices and beliefs, and they impose only one so called correct form of practice. So, something that I mentioned with reference to Sassurian model in terms of prescriptivism, that the moment these models are used by prescriptivists, they try to impose it rather than seeing it as something descriptive. So, we need to accept the variations in practices and dialogues that allow such practices to flourish and to provide an equal opportunity for every voice in the process of communication. That's all I had to share. These are the references that I've used. Thank you. Any questions? I'll just unshare my PPT so that I can see you people. Yeah, thank you. Look forward to your questions.
Sir, with your permission, let me give a note to the technical team, sir.
Okay.
Tilaga,
Shri?
can you make the chat box enabled for participants?
Yeah, it's enabled, Pa.
Okay.
Yeah. Just one or two comments.
Participants, you shall post your questions in the chat box. Otherwise, you shall unmute yourself and ask the questions to sir.
Dear participants, use the chat box for question and answers.
Okay. More examples from movies or advertisements. Okay. Uh, yeah, there is a direct message to me from Soumita Sarkar. See, advertisements are more or less metaphoric in most of the cases. Right now, I'm concentrating on the proper noun. So I'll give you one example of, let's say, proper noun that's used very eloquently in most of our films, especially in Hindi films. We have a name, Karan. Whenever an actor or the character is show called najaiz aulad or discarded child from the family, then his name will be Karan. Because we are our filmmakers and our writers normally take the meaning from the Mahabharata, our mythological traditions. So Karan is basically one of those childs who could not stay with their family members. He was the sixth of the Pandava. So same meaning was associated when the Karan name was used in majority of our films. Okay, even these TV serials like Kyunke Saas Bhi Kabhi Bahu Thi, where you had that what we call the child of Mihir Virani from his another wife, his name was Karan. On the other hand, we also use something like um, Krishna and Kanaya. So basically, there was a movie also Anil Kapoor starred at Kishan Kanaya. So Kishan Kanaya basically refers to two different what we call avatars of Lord Krishna. So Kishan is a kind of politically conscious person and who is capable of guiding and what we call leading the what we call his followers, right? And that's why in the movie, the Anil Kapoor, whose name was Kishan, was a kind of macho person. He was fighting all the time. On the other hand, Kanaya is something that refers to the innocence and his what we call his uh, life in Vrindavan, where he was busy with gopis in Ras Leela. So that those characteristics were associated with the character of Anil Kapoor, whose name was Kanaya. So almost everything that we use in visual culture has certain non-literal association. Okay. And like you have this mocha advertisement about this cricket matches, especially when there is a match between India and Pakistan. So that advertisement is well accepted in India because we have that unwritten animosity with the Pakistan, and the advertisers are using it to their own what we call benefit. So there are plenty of examples available. Yeah.
So one more question in the chat box.
I doubt. Yeah, honestly, Fair and Lovely has changed into Glow and Lovely. Yeah. Yeah, Fair and yeah, Sumitra has put a comment on Fair and Lovely. Fair and Lovely has changed name to Glow and Lovely because of the uh, what we call pressure from the feminist and uh, but again, see, when we are changing the names because of the taboo reason, the changed name itself becomes the taboo. Okay, like almost all the taboo words that we are using, they were once the normal words. Okay, and they are put in to the place of the taboo word, but eventually they also achieve that taboo idea. Okay, very good. uh, Gender politics in language, or the metaphorical representation of genders in language. There's amazing work done on genders and metaphor. Robin Lakoff is one of the very good sources for that, and Deborah Tannen has also written on the communicative aspects across the gender. So you are primarily concerned probably about the uh, feminine gender, the what we call representation of feminine gender in the language. So I've done one research long back, maybe in 2010-11, about the representation of gender in Gujarati, because Gujarati has a rich gender system. We have three genders: masculine, feminine, and neutral. But what is interesting is the gender is also assigned to the things which are non-living. Okay, so how do you decide the gender of those non-living things? So in Gujarati, what happens that the things which are smaller will be assigned feminine gender, and the things which are big will be assigned masculine gender. So like we borrowed a word like bottle from English, and then it was nativized into Gujarati, and then it is called bottle or batlo in masculine gender. It's a big bottle, so it's called batlo. And if it's a small bottle, it is called batli, feminine gender. So what's happening is you're not just categorizing masculine versus feminine. You're also categorizing the big versus small, and by extension, you're also categorizing feminine as inferior, superior versus inferior. So then, uh, grammatically, people also use this feminine gender to insult others, even if they're referring to the masculine gender, or they are talking to a male. But in order to insult that person, they use the feminine gender marker. So, right. So that is embedded in the language itself. You cannot remove, like in English, we have chairman. So we want to make it unbiased and we make it chairperson. We use a neutral term. But uh, in Gujarati, it is embedded in the gender system. You cannot change the gender system of the language. So it's very difficult to uh, present things, what we call, in a neutral way. So, so gender and the bias associated with the gender is inbuilt in the language there. And there are many other languages where these kind of issues are there. And John Lakoff's book called Women, Fire, and Dangerous Things also talk about these kind of categories. And it is one of the most important books in the study of metaphors and cognitive domain. Thank you. Okay, very interesting. Yeah, Soumitra is sending messages that comes to me directly. Uh, Now, Italian government has passed law to include both father's and mother's surname in child's name towards inclusive society. Okay. The inclusive society on a, like, what we call, from theoretical perspective, it is very good idea, but it is impossible until unless we remove the very idea of patriarchy from our mind. Whether we are using names of parents, both the parents, even in India, we, for our living certificates, for our passports, we include the both the parents' names. Okay. But we are not still becoming inclusive. So the base of patriarchy has to be removed in order to develop that kind of inclusive society. Right. Yes, definitely we have to walk a very, very long way. We have come so far. We have changed a lot, but we still have to do a lot to change the society into a society based on the principles of equality and equity. Yeah. Any other question?
So there is a question from Sagufta.
Okay. Yes, please. Yeah.
I have posted the question.
Even for LGBTQ community, we have a problematic space in linguistics. Yes. Uh, can you please read the question? I'm unable to locate it.
Yeah, after so many years, people do not like to name their children like Kaiki.
Yes.
Is it metaphorical conception of the mythology? What is your what is your point of view about this thought?
Yes, it is. Like we have certain conceptions about the names that we are using, and those conceptions are coming from our knowledge of the world. So like in north you don't find the name like Ravan or Kansha, because they are directly associated with the negative idea or negative character of Ravan and Kansha. Right. So that's why the people are not keeping these kind of names. So there was this big controversy about Taimur Ali Khan's name in India. Okay. So that was again the idea comes from that very idea of that Temur was once a kind of ruler here, and he has somehow affected the idea of the Indian culture, and that's why people were against this idea of keeping Temur as a name.
Uh, Hello.
Yeah.
Sir, definitely you are right. But as literature and language learners, we are, is it the need to change all these concepts? Because the real meaning, according to language, KK meaning is a good meaning. And if we think about this character KK, she was a good mother who was thinking about Bharata. So
Hmm.
why we are not applying such names? Why we have discarded from the society such
Hmm.
names?
Yes. See, it's not about who Kaikai was. It's about what is the conception of Kaikai in modern society. So if the conception is negative, people will not accept it and people will try to avoid it. It's basically about the human perception rather than what reality is, because we construct that reality through the language that we are using. So we don't want to impose that reality on our children, and that's why we try to avoid those names. But it is again, you will find a lot of exceptional cases where KKE name will be there. So it completely depends on what kind of society that you are talking about. We have Mahabharata in Gujarat. There is a community called Bhil community who has their own Mahabharata where Arjuna is the villain.
Yeah, the same reason I have asked this, that if we are changing the role of the characters, right?
Mm.
So why we are not accepting all of the things like that, the naming our children and all that? If we can think about Snow White, we can think
Mm.
about the mother, she can be good. So why
Mm.
we can't change? Because language is lively, it's alive, it's changing every day. So is it something that male and female dominating kind of society? We say always no, this is not a good name,
Mm.
always.
Mm.
Yes.
Yes, it see patriarchy is all dominant in India in most of our communities. So Kaikeyi is someone who was taking a stand for her own child, going against her husband's wish. So that is again something going against the idea of patriarchy. Okay. Right.
Okay. Yeah, right. Thank you so much, sir. Thank
Yeah.
you. Thank you.
Good morning, sir. Can I ask one last question?
Yeah, yeah, sure. Please.
Sir, when we are going towards into it, sir, the latest thing that is the renaming of the old cities into the new ones, sir.
Yes.
Sir, what is your idea about this? Because I think I shouldn't be politically correct or incorrect, but my personal opinion, we are going far off in changing everything. Don't you think, sir, that renaming entirely changes the cultural, the contextual, the discoursal, every meaning of that particular place or thing as it is, sir? Thank you, sir.
Renaming is directly associated with the idea of memory. By renaming something, you are trying to what we call delete its actual memory, and you are trying to restart a new history of the given place or a person. So basically renaming always comes from certain idea of or certain ideological stand that they want to see the world in only one way. So this is what I said in my conclusion, that when we try to impose certain level of prescriptivism, we basically try to impose monoculturalism. We will try to what we call delete all the reminiscence or all the memories of the what we call varieties that we had. So renaming is part of that process where we try to delete the past memories and we want to create another what we call stand or memory of that. So if you are interested in this particular field, you can check Ganesh Devi's book called After Amnesia. And Ganesh Devi has also published another book in 2022, The Epic and the Nation, where he's because Ganesh Devi's is basically basic ideology, and the core theme of his research is the idea of memory and loss of memory.
Thank you so much, sir, for giving me the correct answer and suggesting some good books also. Sir, I would like to connect with you because I am working in JNV Patan, Gujarat, and
Oh, wonderful.
I am doing my PhD in Gujarat University. So,
Oh,
and it
wonderful.
is in an EFL, that is Applied Linguistics. So, I would like to contact you, sir. I have taken your email ID, sir, and I hope
Wonderful.
that I'll definitely get some good guidance from your side. Thank you, sir.
Who is your guide from Gujarat University?
Sir, my guide is Dr. Bharti Dave, ma'am. She is the principal of Women's College,
Yeah,
Old Ahmedabad, sir.
yeah, I've got the name.
And
All right.
Dushyant sir is very good and very cooperative when it comes to giving information. So
Wonderful.
they are, Darshana ma'am is also known to me, sir. And
Mhm.
I'm a part-time PhD student there.
All
Thank you,
right,
sir.
all right. Yeah, sure. All the best. So I hope there are no more questions.